Imagine a species so patient, so enduring, that they would suffer insults and humiliation for decades without a single word of protest. Imagine a people who built bridges while others burned them, who extended hands while others turned backs, who spoke of peace while others whispered of war. Now imagine what happens when that same species, humanity, finally decides they've had enough. The Galactic Council thought humans were weak. They thought our silence meant submission, our diplomacy meant defeat. They were wrong. Sometimes the quietest exit makes the loudest statement, and sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply leaving. This is the story of how humanity taught the galaxy that respect isn't given, it's earned. And when it's lost, some bridges can never be rebuilt. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood at the entrance of the Galactic Council chamber for what would be the last time, though none of the assembled delegates knew it yet. The massive crystalline structure stretched impossibly high above her, its walls alive with the soft glow of 1,000 different atmospheric processors, each one calibrated to support the various species that made up the council. The air itself shimmered with a complex mixture of gases and pheromones needed to keep everyone comfortable, a technological marvel that had taken humanity 3 years to develop and freely share. She smoothed down her simple blue diplomatic suit, a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by the other ambassadors. The Velcari delegation sparkled in their bioluminescent robes that pulsed with their emotional states. The Thrakari wore their traditional war chiton, polished to mirror brightness despite this being a peaceful assembly. Even the diminutive Zephyrians had donned their crystal crowns that chimed softly with each movement. Sarah had always preferred simplicity. Today, it felt like armor. The chamber fell into its customary hush as the council speaker, High Magistrate Veltar of the Hegemony Core Worlds, called the session to order. His 6 arms gestured in the formal patterns of ancient protocol, while his translator unit rendered his chittering speech into the common galactic tongue. We gather today to address the motion put forth by the Velcari Consortium regarding the redistribution of defensive assets in the Outer Rim territories, Veltar announced, his compound eyes scanning the assembled delegates with what Sarah had learned to recognize as barely concealed impatience. Sarah knew what was coming. She had been attending these sessions for 12 years now, ever since humanity had been granted observer status in the Council. 12 years of sitting quietly while others debated the fate of colonies that hung in space like forgotten jewels. 12 years of watching humanity's contributions be dismissed, their innovations be appropriated, their diplomatic overtures be met with polite condescension. Ambassador Crixtal of the Velcari Consortium rose first, her bioluminescent skin already shifting to the deep purples and golds that indicated formal speech mode. "Honored colleagues," she began, her voice carrying the artificial sweetness that her species used for diplomatic occasions. "The time has come to address the elephant in the room, as our human observers might say." A ripple of what passed for laughter among the various species filled the chamber. Sarah's expression didn't change, but her hands clasped slightly tighter behind her back. The defensive installations in Sectors 7 through 12 have been operating at minimal efficiency. Crixtal continued, her skin now pulsing with confident blues and silvers. "Our analysis shows that a reallocation of resources could improve overall security by 37%. However, this would require the temporary withdrawal of certain volunteer forces that have been operating in the region." Sarah knew exactly which volunteer forces Crixtal meant. The human colonies in those sectors have been defending not just their own worlds, but serving as a buffer zone for the entire region for over 8 years. Their military technology might not have been as advanced as some council species, but their determination and tactical creativity had turned back 3 separate incursions by the Void Crawlers, saving millions of lives across dozens of worlds. "The proposal has merit," rumbled General Thrak News of the Thrakari War clans, his massive form shifting in the specially reinforced chair designed to support his bulk. "However, we must consider the strategic implications of removing established defensive positions. The humans have proven adequate in their sector assignments." "Adequate?" Sarah almost smiled at the word. The humans had lost 40,000 soldiers, and civilians defending worlds that weren't even their own had shared technology that had revolutionized medical treatment across the galaxy, and had provided food and supplies during the Great Blight that had saved the Zephyrian homeworld from starvation. Adequate. With respect to my colleague, interjected Ambassador Yithmara of the Crystalline Confederacy, her voice ringing like struck bells, the question is not one of adequate performance, but of optimal resource allocation. Our projections indicate that a coordinated defense grid utilizing proven Council technologies will be far more efficient than relying on auxiliary forces. Auxiliary forces. That was a new one. Sarah added it to the mental collection she'd been keeping over the years. Observers. Volunteers. Auxiliary forces. Never partners. Never equals. Always something less. The debate continued for another hour, with various delegates offering their opinions on the best way to reorganize the defense of space that human ships had been patrolling, human soldiers had been dying in, and human engineers had been fortifying for nearly a decade. Through it all, Sarah waited for the moment she knew would come. It was Ambassador Zelthara of the Nexus Worlds who finally provided it. Rising with the fluid grace of his aquatic species, the water in his environmental suit rippling with his movement, he fixed his large, dark eyes on Sarah's section of the chamber. Of course, we should acknowledge the contributions made by our human observers during their time in the Outer Rim, he said, his tone carrying the kind of carefully modulated respect usually reserved for a child's finger painting. Their enthusiasm and willingness to serve in dangerous areas has been noted. However, as we move forward with this new defensive strategy, we must be realistic about capabilities and limitations. He paused, and Sarah could see several other delegates nodding in agreement. The human defensive installations, while built with admirable determination, simply do not meet current Council standards for technological sophistication. Their military protocols, though energetic, lack the coordination possible with our integrated command systems. And their diplomatic presence in the region, while well-intentioned, has occasionally created complications with established trade relationships. More nods. Sarah noticed that no one mentioned that the complications Zelthara referred to were the result of human officials refusing to overlook the slave trade that several Council species engaged in beyond the core worlds. Therefore, Zelthara continued, while we certainly appreciate humanity's eagerness to contribute to galactic security, we believe it would be in everyone's best interest if they were to step back from active operations in these sectors. Allow the professionals to handle matters going forward. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of the atmosphere processors and the soft chiming of the Zephyrian ambassador's crown. Sarah could feel dozens of eyes, organic, compound, and artificial, focused on her, waiting for her response. She stood slowly, her movement deliberate and controlled. When she spoke, her voice was calm, measured, and carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Thank you, Ambassador Zelthara, for that illuminating perspective. She paused, scanning the assembled delegates. Before I respond to the Council's proposal, I believe there are some facts that should be entered into the official record. A few delegates shifted uncomfortably. Sarah had never spoken at length during a Council session, despite having been granted the right to address the Assembly years ago. In the 8 years that human forces have maintained a presence in the Outer Rim sectors, we have logged 2,847 separate defensive actions against various hostile forces. Our casualty reports show 40,127 human military and civilian deaths in the line of duty. Our engineering corps has constructed 1,205 defensive installations, 89 emergency supply depots, and 34 medical stations that serve not just human colonies, but any ship or settlement in need. The chamber was completely quiet now. Our medical teams have treated 340,000 casualties from 23 different species during this period, including several delegates currently present in this chamber. Our agricultural specialists have provided emergency food aid to 67 different worlds during natural disasters, plague outbreaks, and economic crises. Our industrial fabrication units have produced and freely shared technological innovations that have been adopted by every major species in the Council. She paused, letting the numbers sink in. Our diplomatic corps has negotiated peaceful resolutions to 156 separate conflicts in the region, including the Mercarian trade war that was threatening to destabilize the entire sector before human mediators were able to facilitate a lasting agreement. Sarah could see several delegates checking their personal data displays, confirming her figures. She had been meticulous in her record-keeping over the years, knowing that someday these numbers might matter. Now, regarding the Council's assessment of our capabilities, she turned slightly to face Zelthara directly. Our defensive installations have successfully repelled 3 major Void Crawler incursions with a 94% success rate. Our unsophisticated military protocols have resulted in tactical victories against superior forces through what our generals call creative problem-solving. And our diplomatic complications have resulted in the liberation of approximately 80,000 enslaved sentients whose freedom apparently didn't factor into the Council's definition of established trade relationships. The silence in the chamber was now uncomfortable. Several delegates were actively avoiding eye contact. But you're absolutely correct about one thing, Ambassador Zelthara. It is time for humanity to step back from active operations in the Outer Rim sectors. Sarah's voice remained perfectly level. In fact, it's time for humanity to step back from active operations everywhere in Council space. Now, she had their attention. Veltar leaned forward in his chair, his compound eyes focusing with sudden sharpness. Effective immediately, all human military forces will begin withdrawal from their current positions. All human-operated defensive installations will be powered down and abandoned. All human medical, agricultural, and engineering personnel will cease operations and return to Earth or the independent human colonies. The chamber erupted in voices, chittering, warbling, chiming, and rumbling as the various species tried to process what they were hearing. Furthermore, Sarah continued, her voice cutting through the chaos, humanity is formally withdrawing from the Galactic Council Observer Program. We will be closing our embassies and consulates throughout Council space and terminating all formal diplomatic relationships. You cannot do this. Crixtal was on her feet, her skin flashing angry reds and oranges. The obligations, the treaties, will all be fulfilled to the letter, Sarah interrupted smoothly. Humanity has never broken a treaty or failed to honor a commitment. We will complete our withdrawal in an orderly fashion, ensure the safety of all Council citizens currently in human space, and transfer any ongoing projects to Council oversight as requested. But the defensive positions, General Thrak news started, are being freely given to the Council, along with all technology, intelligence, and strategic planning we have developed for the region. Consider it our final contribution to galactic security. High Magistrate Veltar finally managed to restore some semblance of order to the chamber. Ambassador Chun, he said, his translator unit struggling with his rapid speech. Surely this is a hasty reaction to what was merely a discussion of strategic optimization. Perhaps we could explore alternative arrangements. With respect, High Magistrate, this decision was not made hastily, nor was it made in response to today's discussion. This is the result of 12 years of careful observation and deliberation. Humanity has concluded that our vision for galactic cooperation is fundamentally incompatible with the Council's preferred approach to interspecies relations. Sarah reached into her jacket and withdrew a small data crystal, placing it on the podium in front of her. This contains a complete record of humanity's contributions to the Council over the past 12 years, along with detailed transfer documents for all ongoing projects and defensive positions. It also contains formal notice of withdrawal from all treaties, trade agreements, and cooperative protocols between humanity and the Council species. She paused, looking around the chamber one final time. There is one more item of business. The technology sharing agreements that humanity has participated in over the years were based on the principle of mutual respect and cooperation. Since the Council has determined that humanity's contributions are inadequate for continued participation in galactic affairs, we are hereby revoking all technological licenses granted to Council species. The chamber erupted again, louder this time. Sarah could see the implications dawning on various delegates as they realized what she was saying. The medical nanotechnology that has eliminated 7 major diseases across the galaxy, the atmospheric processing systems that allow multi-species cooperation like this very chamber, the quantum communication networks that enable real-time coordination across galactic distances, the agricultural enhancement techniques that have ended famine on 47 worlds, and the defensive shielding technology that has made your core worlds impregnable. All of these innovations were developed by human scientists and freely shared under cooperative agreements that assumed continued partnership and mutual respect. She picked up the data crystal again. As of today, those agreements are terminated. Any continued use of human-developed technology without proper licensing will be considered theft of intellectual property. Humanity will be enforcing these rights through whatever means we deem necessary. The chaos in the chamber was now beyond Veltar's ability to control. Sarah could see emergency conference happening at various delegation tables as the full scope of her announcement began to sink in. She had one more thing to say. Before I leave, I want to address one final matter. There seems to be a common misconception among council species that humanity sought membership in this organization because we needed you, that we came here as supplicants, hoping for protection or guidance or technological advancement. Sarah's voice took on a harder edge. Let me be absolutely clear. Humanity came to the Council because we believe in the dream of peaceful cooperation among the stars. We believe that together, we could build something greater than any species could achieve alone. We believe that our differences could be strengths rather than divisions. She looked directly at each delegation in turn. We were wrong. You saw our willingness to serve as weakness. You mistook our desire for cooperation as desperation. You interpreted our patience as submission. And you assumed that because we came to you with open hands, we had no power to close them. Sarah turned toward the exit, then paused. You will discover your error soon enough. Humanity survived and thrived for millennia before we knew you existed. We will do so again. The only question is whether you can do the same without us. She walked toward the chamber exit as the chaos behind her reached a crescendo. At the doorway, she turned back one final time. Oh, and High Magistrate, you might want to check your defensive grid status. I believe you'll find that several key systems have just gone offline. Consider it a preview of what adequate performance actually looks like. With that, Ambassador Sarah Chun walked out of the Galactic Council chamber, leaving behind 12 years of humanity's best efforts at diplomacy and cooperation. Behind her, the Council was just beginning to realize the magnitude of their mistake. The quiet exit had begun. Captain Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Determination, watching the tactical display as the last of the human transport ships cleared the Kepler Station defense perimeter. The massive orbital facility that had taken 3 years to build and had served as the primary defensive anchor for the entire Outer Rim sector was now dark. Its powerful weapon systems powered down, its shield generators offline. Final Transport Group has cleared minimum safe distance, Captain, reported Lieutenant Commander Singh from a navigation station. All personnel and equipment successfully evacuated. Marcus nodded, his eyes still fixed on the display. 26,000 people had called Kepler Station home. Engineers, technicians, military personnel, civilian contractors, and their families. Now they were all crammed into transport ships, heading back toward Earth or the independent human colonies with whatever personal belongings they could carry. Signal from Admiral Harrison, sir, announced Communications Officer Torres. Operation Exodus is proceeding on schedule across all sectors. Estimated completion time, 72 hours. 72 hours to dismantle 8 years of human presence in Council space. It seemed impossible, but Marcus had watched the logistical planning sessions where Admiral Harrison and her staff had worked out every detail. They had been preparing for this possibility for longer than anyone in the council would have guessed. "Captain," called out his science officer, Dr. Elena Vasquez, "I'm reading massive subspace communications activity throughout the sector. The council species are definitely talking to each other, and the chatter is increasing exponentially." Marcus wasn't surprised. The technological shutdowns had begun exactly 30 minutes after Ambassador Chen's announcement, and the effects were cascading through council space faster than anyone had anticipated. The quantum communication networks that enabled real-time coordination across galactic distances were human technology, licensed freely under cooperation agreements. When those licenses were revoked, the networks automatically shut down, reverting to whatever backup systems the various species maintained. For most council species, those backup systems were decades out of date. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Valkyrie Consortium flagship," Torres reported. "Ambassador Krixtal is requesting immediate audience with you." Marcus almost smiled. "Tell the ambassador that Captain Rodriguez is currently engaged in essential ship operations and cannot accommodate non-emergency diplomatic communications at this time." "Understood, sir." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Everyone knew that Marcus was simply following the new protocols issued by Admiral Harrison. All diplomatic communications were to be routed through proper channels back to Earth, and local commanders were no longer authorized to conduct negotiations with council species. It was a not-so-subtle way of making it clear that humanity was serious about the withdrawal. "Captain, I'm detecting several council ships moving to intercept our evacuation routes," reported Tactical Officer Commander Park. "Thackeray Heavy Cruiser Group approaching Vector 77. Crystalline Confederacy patrol ships on intercept course with Transport Group Delta." This was the moment Marcus had been waiting for. Admiral Harrison had been very specific about the rules of engagement during the withdrawal. Humanity would not fire first, but they would not be prevented from leaving either. "All evacuation groups. This is determination actual," Marcus announced over the fleet communication channel. "Maintain course and speed. Any attempt to interfere with our withdrawal will be considered a hostile act." "Sir, the Thackeray Cruiser Group is signaling us," Torres called out. "General Thrack News himself is requesting to speak with you personally." "Put him through." The main screen flickered and resolved into the massive, armor-plated form of General Thrack News. The Thackeray military leader's translator was working overtime to keep up with his rapid, agitated speech. "Captain Rodriguez, I demand an explanation for this unprecedented action," the general rumbled, his forearms gesturing in what Marcus recognized as extreme agitation. "The withdrawal of human forces from established defensive positions is creating a massive security vulnerability. You cannot simply abandon your posts in the middle of an active threat zone." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "General, with respect, we are not abandoning our posts. We are transferring operational control to the Council as per their request. All defensive installations and strategic intelligence are being made available to Council forces. But without proper transition protocols, without training on human systems, without..." Thrack News paused, clearly struggling with the implications. "These positions cannot be effectively maintained without human technical expertise. I'm sure the Council's superior technology and professional military forces will have no difficulty adapting," Marcus replied, deliberately echoing Ambassador Zeltharaz's words from the Council session. "After all, our installations were described as not meeting current Council standards for technological sophistication." The General's translator unit sparked slightly as it tried to process his increasingly agitated response. "Captain, you must understand. The strategic situation in this sector is more complex than the Council debates might suggest. The Void Crawlers have been conducting reconnaissance probes along the outer perimeter for weeks. Our intelligence suggests they are preparing for another major incursion." This was news to Marcus, but his expression didn't change. "Have you shared this intelligence with the Council Defense Committee?" Thrack News hesitated. "The intelligence comes from sources that the committee might not consider entirely reliable." Marcus understood. The Thackeray had been conducting their own covert operations in the region, probably violating a dozen different council protocols in the process. Now, they were facing the prospect of dealing with a potential void crawler invasion without the human forces that had been their primary ally in previous encounters. General, I appreciate your concerns, but my orders are clear. All human forces are to withdraw from council space immediately. Any intelligence or strategic resources you require should be requested through proper diplomatic channels. But there are no proper diplomatic channels. Thrak News exploded, his translator unit emitting a small puff of smoke. Your ambassador terminated all formal relationships. Our communication networks are failing because of your technology restrictions. The Council Defense Committee cannot even coordinate a proper emergency session. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Perhaps you should have thought of that before voting to remove humanity from active operations in the region. The connection terminated abruptly as Thrak News apparently decided he had heard enough. Marcus turned to his communications officer. Torres, make sure that entire conversation is recorded and transmitted to Admiral Harrison. I have a feeling the general won't be the last council leader who wants to discuss the implications of our withdrawal. Already done, sir. Captain, Dr. Vasquez called from the science station. I'm detecting some unusual readings from the Kepler Station reactor core. Marcus frowned. Unusual how? We shut down all systems before evacuation. That's just it, sir. The reactor should be completely inert, but I'm reading some kind of controlled fusion reaction in the primary core chamber. Very low level, but definitely active. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Torres, give me Commander Watson in engineering immediately. The response came through almost instantly. Watson here, Captain. Commander, I need to know the exact status of Kepler Station's reactor systems. All primary systems were shut down and secured before evacuation, sir. We followed standard decommissioning protocols to the letter. Then, explain why Dr. Vasquez is reading active fusion reactions in the core chamber. There was a pause. Sir, that's impossible unless someone has been trying to restart the reactor without proper authorization codes. Marcus exchanged glances with his senior officers. How long would it take to bring the reactor online without the proper codes? For someone unfamiliar with our systems? Days, maybe weeks, assuming they don't trigger the automatic lockout sequences. But, sir, if they're attempting to restart the reactor incorrectly, they could cause a core breach that would destroy the entire station and anything within 1,000 kilometers. Dr. Vasquez, how many council ships are currently in the immediate vicinity of Kepler Station? Scanning. I count 7 vessels, sir. Mixed nationalities. Looks like they're conducting some kind of joint operation around the station. Marcus made his decision quickly. Torres, open a channel to all council vessels in the Kepler Station area. Channel open, sir. Attention all council vessels. This is Captain Rodriguez of the UES Determination. You are hereby advised that Kepler Station's reactor systems contain multiple automated safety protocols that will trigger if tampered with improperly. Any attempt to restart the reactor without proper authorization codes will result in a cascading failure that could destroy the station and any nearby vessels. For your own safety, we recommend maintaining a minimum distance of 2,000 kilometers from the station until qualified human technicians can be consulted. The response came immediately from a Valkyrie science vessel. Captain Rodriguez, this is Research Director Mixtar of the Consortium Science Fleet. We have been authorized by the Council Defense Committee to conduct a full technical assessment of all transferred human installations. We are well within our rights to examine these facilities. Research Director, I'm not questioning your authority to examine the installations. I'm advising you that the safety protocols built into our technology are specifically designed to prevent unauthorized access. These aren't mere security measures. They're life safety systems. Are you threatening council personnel, Captain? Marcus felt his patience wearing thin. Research Director, I'm trying to prevent you from accidentally killing yourself and everyone around you. The reactor systems on Kepler Station require specific activation sequences that were designed by human engineers for human technicians. Attempting to bypass these systems without proper knowledge could result in a reactor breach equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. There was a long pause before Mixtar responded. We were not informed of such safety restrictions. That information was included in the technical transfer documents provided to the Council Defense Committee approximately 4 hours ago. I suggest you contact them for the complete safety specifications before proceeding. Another pause. Captain, our communication with the Defense Committee has been difficult since the quantum network shut down. Marcus understood. Without the human-developed quantum communication systems, the Council was back to using traditional subspace communications, which had significant range limitations and were prone to interference. The very technology they had taken for granted was now revealed as critical to their basic operations. Research Director, I'm going to provide you with a secure data package containing the minimal safety information necessary to avoid triggering the automated lockout systems. However, please understand that this is being provided on a humanitarian basis to prevent loss of life, not as a resumption of technological cooperation. We understand, Captain, and we appreciate your consideration. Marcus nodded to Dr. Vasquez, who began preparing a basic technical package with the essential safety information. It was a careful balance, providing enough information to prevent a disaster, but not enough to allow the Council to fully exploit the technology. Captain, Commander Parr called from the tactical station. I'm detecting massive fleet movements throughout Council space. It looks like every major species is mobilizing their reserve forces. Marcus pulled up the strategic display on his command screen. Park was right. There were fleet movements on a scale he hadn't seen since the last major void crawler incursion 3 years ago. But these ships weren't moving toward the outer defensive perimeters. They were moving toward the core worlds. They're scared, Dr. Vasquez observed quietly. Without the human defensive network and communication systems, they can't coordinate their usual defense strategies. And without our intelligence-gathering operations, they don't have early warning of potential threats, added Commander Park. Marcus studied the display for a long moment. The Council had just realized what many human military analysts had known for years. Despite their advanced individual technologies, the various species had become dependent on human logistics, coordination, and strategic planning to maintain their collective security. Sir, incoming transmission from Admiral Harrison, Torres announced. Marcus turned to face the main screen as Admiral Harrison's image appeared. The Admiral looked tired but determined. Marcus, I need a status report on the Kepler station situation. Evacuation complete, Admiral. However, Council forces are attempting to access our technology without proper safety protocols. We've provided minimal technical assistance to prevent loss of life. Good call. I've been fielding similar requests from across the sector. It seems the Council is discovering that professional forces aren't as familiar with our systems as they assumed. Harrison paused. I've got more news. The Mercarian Trade Confederation has formally requested continued human presence in their territory. They're offering to break with the Council if necessary. Marcus raised an eyebrow. The Mercarians were one of the smaller species, but they controlled several crucial trade routes in the region. What's your response, Admiral? Still considering it. The Mercarians have always been straight with us, and their territory never officially joined the Council anyway. But we need to be careful not to appear to be trying to split the Council alliance. Unless they split themselves, Marcus observed. Exactly. From what I'm hearing, today's events have caused some serious fractures in Council unity. Apparently, several species were not fully informed about the extent of human technological integration in their systems. Marcus wasn't surprised. The Council's bureaucratic structure often meant that information was compartmentalized among different committees and departments. It was entirely possible that the species voting on humanity's withdrawal didn't fully understand what they were voting to give up. Admiral, I'm also hearing reports of potential void crawler activity in the outer sectors. General Thrak News seemed genuinely concerned about the security implications of our withdrawal. Harrison's expression grew serious. I've heard similar reports from other sector commanders. It's possible that the void crawlers have been watching our movements and see this as an opportunity to probe Council defenses. Orders, Admiral, continue the withdrawal as planned, but keep our scout ships at maximum range around the perimeter. If the void crawlers are planning something, I want to know about it before they make their move. Understood, Admiral. The connection terminated, leaving Marcus to contemplate the tactical display. The withdrawal was proceeding smoothly, but the long-term implications were becoming clearer by the hour. The Council had assumed they were dismissing a junior partner whose contributions were nice to have, but not essential. Instead, they had just discovered that they had been dependent on humanity for far more than anyone had realized. Captain, Dr. Vasquez called softly. I'm detecting some interesting patterns in the subspace communication traffic. It looks like several species are trying to establish direct contact with our withdrawal fleet, bypassing Council channels entirely. Ooh, the Mercarians, as Admiral Harrison mentioned, but also the Zephyrians, the Aquatic Collective, and the Free Traders Alliance. Marcus considered this. The Free Traders Alliance wasn't technically a Council member. They were an independent confederation of merchant ships and trading stations that operated throughout the galaxy. If they were reaching out to humanity directly, it suggested they saw opportunity in the current situation. Any responses from our people? All contacts are being referred back to Earth for proper diplomatic handling, as per protocol. Good. Let Earth decide who we want to talk to and who we don't. Marcus turned back to the tactical display, watching as the last human ships cleared Council space. In 72 hours, an 8-year presence would be completely erased. All that would remain would be the empty installations and the growing realization among Council species of what they had lost. The quiet exit was proceeding exactly as planned. But Marcus had a feeling that the quiet wouldn't last much longer. The galaxy was about to become a much more complicated place, and humanity had just demonstrated that they were not as powerless as everyone had assumed. Behind them, the Council was discovering that respect, once lost, was very difficult to regain, and some lessons could only be learned the hard way. High Magistrate Veltar stood in his private chambers overlooking the Council's central complex, watching the emergency fleet formations gathering in the orbital space above the core worlds. In 30 years of service to the hegemony and 20 years as a Council official, he had never seen such a rapid mobilization of defensive forces. The irony was not lost on him that this massive military response was being triggered not by an external threat, but by the departure of their most peaceful member species. The communication panel on his desk chimed insistently, displaying 17 urgent messages from various Council delegations, 12 emergency reports from the Defense Committee, and 43 requests for priority audience from species representatives throughout Council space. He ignored them all, instead focusing on the report that had arrived 20 minutes ago from the Central Intelligence Division. The report made for sobering reading. In the 72 hours since humanity's withdrawal had begun, the cascading effects were accelerating beyond anyone's worst projections. The quantum communication networks that linked the core worlds to the outer territories had completely failed, leaving vast regions of Council space operating on outdated subspace relays with transmission delays measured in days rather than minutes. Medical facilities across 47 worlds were reporting critical shortages as the human-developed nanotechnology that had revolutionized disease treatment stopped functioning without its regular update protocols. Agricultural worlds that had become dependent on human enhancement techniques were projecting massive crop failures within the next growing season. But it was the military situation that truly alarmed him. The defensive installations that humanity had constructed and maintained were not just weapons platforms. They were integrated sensor networks, early warning systems, and coordination hubs that had become the backbone of Council security operations. Without them, the Outer Rim territories were effectively blind to external threats. A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry to his chambers. Veltar activated the privacy screen and permitted access, not particularly surprised to see Ambassador Krixtal of the Velcari Consortium entering with the fluid urgency that characterized her species when agitated. High Magistrate, She began without preamble, her bioluminescent skin cycling through rapid patterns of orange and red distress. We have a situation that requires immediate council intervention. Veltar gestured toward one of the specially designed chairs that accommodated various alien physiologies. Please, Ambassador. What situation? Krikstal's skin patterns shifted to more controlled blues as she composed herself. 3 hours ago, the Mercarian Trade Confederation formally withdrew from all council economic treaties and announced the establishment of independent trade agreements with humanity. They are offering human ships transit rights through Mercarian space and have requested human assistance in establishing their own defensive network. Veltar's compound eyes focused more sharply. The Mercarians were never full council members. Their withdrawal from economic treaties, while concerning, does not constitute a crisis. High Magistrate, with respect, that's not the crisis. Krikstal's patterns shifted back to agitated oranges. The Zephyrian Assembly has announced they are considering a similar withdrawal. The Aquatic Collective has suspended all council cooperation pending re-evaluation of priorities. And 6 different Free Trader Alliance fleets have formally requested passage through council space to reach human territory. Now Veltar understood. The council wasn't just losing humanity. They were potentially losing multiple species and trading partners as other entities began to question the value of council membership in a post-human galaxy. What is the consortium's position on these developments? Veltar asked carefully. Krikstal's bioluminescence dimmed noticeably. The consortium's economic analysis indicates that our trade relationships with humanity generated approximately 37% of our total external revenue. The loss of human agricultural technology threatens food security on 11 of our worlds. And our military advisors are warning that without human intelligence networks, we cannot adequately monitor void crawler activity in our border regions. She paused, her skin cycling through complex patterns that Veltar recognized as deep embarrassment. High Magistrate, the Consortium Council is requesting that I formally propose the immediate renegotiation of humanity's status within the Galactic Council framework. Veltar's mandibles clicked in the hegemony equivalent of bitter laughter. Ambassador, 36 hours ago, you were advocating for humanity's complete removal from Outer Rim operations. Now you wish to negotiate their return. Circumstances have evolved since that discussion. Before Veltar could respond, his communication panel erupted in priority alerts. He activated the main display to see General Thrak news appearing with obvious urgency. High Magistrate, the General rumbled without preamble. We have confirmed Void Crawler fleet movements in sectors 11 through 15. Long-range reconnaissance indicates a major incursion force assembling beyond the Galactic Rim. Without human early warning networks, we estimate they achieved their current position undetected approximately 6 days ago. Veltar felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. Force strength estimates? Preliminary analysis suggests between 2,000 and 3,000 vessels, including several new ship classes we haven't encountered before. High Magistrate, this represents the largest void crawler incursion attempt in the recorded history of Council space. Current Council defensive positions? General Thrak News hesitated. High Magistrate, without the human-operated sensor networks and communication systems, our ability to coordinate a unified defense has been severely compromised. Individual species fleets are responding to local threats, but we lack the integrated command structure necessary for large-scale operations. And the timeline for re-establishing those command systems. Using traditional council technology, months, possibly years. The humans had integrated their systems so thoroughly into our operations that we never developed redundant capabilities. Ambassador Krikstal's bioluminescence had shifted to deep purples, indicating shock. General, are you saying that the Council cannot mount an effective defense against this incursion? Ambassador, I'm saying that without immediate restoration of human technological support, the Council cannot mount any coordinated defense at all. Each species will be forced to defend their own territory independently, with no strategic coordination or intelligence sharing. Veltar processed this information with growing alarm. The Void Crawlers were not like other hostile species. They were an extragalactic force that consumed everything in their path, leaving dead worlds and empty space behind them. Previous incursions had been repelled only through the coordinated efforts of multiple council species working together under integrated command structures. The idea of facing their largest invasion attempt with fragmented, uncoordinated defenses was terrifying. What are our options? Veltar asked. We can attempt to contact humanity directly and request emergency assistance, General Thrak News said. However, our preliminary contacts through back channel suggest that humanity is not interested in providing military support to species that are not formal allies. Meaning that individual species would need to establish separate agreements with humanity outside the Council framework. The humans are apparently no longer willing to provide aid based on previous relationships or general cooperation agreements. Ambassador Krickstall's patterns shifted to what Veltar recognized as calculation. What would individual agreements require? Unknown at this time. The humans have referred all military cooperation requests to their Earth government for formal negotiation. However, early indications suggest they are requiring formal apologies for the circumstances of their departure, reparation for the technological licensing violations, and new agreements based on true partnership rather than the auxiliary status they held previously. Veltar understood the implications immediately. If individual species began negotiating separate agreements with humanity, the Council's unity would be permanently fractured. But without those agreements, they might not survive the coming incursion. High Magistrate, his aide's voice came through the communication system. You have an urgent transmission from the Crystalline Confederacy. Ambassador Yithmara requests immediate audience. Put her through. The display shifted to show Ambassador Yithmara, her crystalline form resonating with what Veltar had learned to recognize as extreme agitation. Her voice rang like struck bells as she spoke. High Magistrate, the Confederacy has completed its analysis of humanity's technological withdrawal. The results are catastrophic. Our medical facilities have lost the ability to treat 17 major diseases. Our industrial fabrication capabilities have been reduced by 60%. Our transportation networks are operating at minimal efficiency without human-developed navigation systems. She paused, her crystalline structure shifting to deeper resonance. High Magistrate, the Confederacy formally requests that the Council authorize immediate negotiations for humanity's return to full partnership status. Veltar noticed that Yithmara had used the word partnership rather than membership. The distinction was significant. It suggested that the Confederacy was prepared to offer humanity a much more elevated status than they had previously held. Ambassador, the Council's previous decision regarding humanity's role in Outer Rim operations was unanimous, Veltar reminded her. High Magistrate, the previous decision was based on incomplete information regarding the scope of human technological integration in our systems. Had the Council been fully informed of the consequences of human withdrawal, the vote would have been very different. Before Veltar could respond, another priority alert appeared on his display. This one showed the insignia of the Council Defense Committee, indicating maximum urgency. High Magistrate, came the voice of Defense Coordinator Zethkul. We have an immediate crisis. The Void Crawler Incursion Force has accelerated its approach. Updated projections indicate first contact with Outer Rim defensive positions in 72 hours. Status of defensive preparations? High Magistrate, the defensive positions are largely unmanned. When human forces withdrew, they transferred operational control to the Council. But without human technical expertise, most of the installations cannot be effectively operated. We have skeleton crews attempting to maintain basic functions, but advanced defensive systems remain offline. General Thrak News leaned forward on the display. Defense Coordinator, what is the maximum defensive capability we can achieve with current resources? General, our best estimates suggest approximately 30% of previous defensive strength, and that assumes optimal coordination between species fleets, which we cannot guarantee without restored communication networks. The silence in Veltar's chambers stretched as the full scope of the situation became clear. The Council was facing the largest external threat in its history, with less than a third of its normal defensive capabilities, fragmented communication systems, and growing internal divisions as member species considered independent relationships with humanity. High Magistrate, Ambassador Krixtal said quietly, "The Consortium formally requests that the Council authorize immediate emergency negotiations with humanity for restoration of technological cooperation and military alliance." The Confederacy seconds this request, added Ambassador Yithmara from the display, as does the Thrakkery war clans, rumbled General Thrak News. Veltar looked at each of them in turn. 3 of the Council's most powerful member species, all formally requesting that the Council reverse its decision regarding humanity within days of implementing it. The political implications were staggering, but the alternative was potentially the complete destruction of Council space. "I will call for an emergency session of the full Council," Veltar said finally. "However, I must point out that even if the Council authorizes such negotiations, we have no guarantee that humanity will agree to resume cooperation. Their withdrawal appears to have been carefully planned, and their new relationships with non-Council entities suggest they are pursuing a different strategic direction." "High Magistrate," came a new voice from the communication system, his aide again. "I have an urgent message from a Mercarian Trade Confederation. They report that humanity has agreed to provide full defensive support for Mercarian territory in exchange for exclusive trading rights and basing agreements. Human fleet elements are already en route to Mercarian space." Veltar felt his certainty crumbling. Humanity was not simply withdrawing from galactic affairs. They were selectively re-engaging with species that offered them genuine partnership rather than subordinate status. The Council had assumed they were irreplaceable, but humanity was demonstrating that the Council itself might be irrelevant. "There's more, High Magistrate," his aide continued. "The Free Traders Alliance has announced the formation of an independent world's defense pact, with humanity as the primary military partner. They're offering membership to any species willing to withdraw from Council authority." Ambassador Krixtal's bioluminescence shifted to patterns Veltar had never seen before. Deep confusion mixed with growing panic. "High Magistrate," she said slowly, "I believe we may have made a strategic error of unprecedented proportions." Veltar activated his personal communication system and began sending priority messages to all Council delegates. In 30 years of service, he had never called an emergency session with less than 12 hours' notice. Today, he was calling one with 2 hours' notice. The Council was about to face the most important vote in its history, and they would be making it under the shadow of an approaching enemy fleet with crumbling defensive systems, and the knowledge that their most reliable military partner was now actively building alliances with their potential rivals. The quiet exit was becoming very loud indeed, and the Council was just beginning to understand the true cost of losing humanity's respect. Admiral Sarah Harrison stood on the command deck of the UES Defiance, humanity's newest and most advanced battleship, watching the tactical displays that showed the evolving situation across what had once been Council space. 48 hours had passed since the emergency Council session, and the political landscape of the galaxy was transforming with stunning rapidity. The emergency session itself had been a masterpiece of political chaos. Species that had unanimously voted to remove humanity from the Outer Rim were now desperately competing to offer the most attractive terms for renewed cooperation. The Velcari Consortium had formally apologized for misunderstandings regarding the scope of human contributions and offered humanity full partnership status with permanent representation on the Council's ruling body. The Crystalline Confederacy had gone further, proposing that humanity be granted a leadership role in all technological development initiatives. Even the typically proud Hegemony Core worlds had offered unprecedented concessions, including shared command authority over Council fleet operations. The problem was that humanity was no longer interested in any of it. "Admiral," called Commander Zhang from the communication station. We're receiving another priority transmission from the Council. This is the 14th request for emergency negotiations in the past 6 hours. Response. Admiral Harrison asked, though she already knew the answer. Standard reply. All diplomatic communications should be directed to Earth through proper channels. No local commanders are authorized to conduct negotiations. Admiral Harrison nodded approvingly. The policy was serving multiple purposes. It was forcing the Council species to recognize Earth as humanity's seat of government rather than treating human commanders in the field as regional representatives, and it was buying time while humanity's new alliances solidified. Status report on the Independent Worlds Defense Pact? She asked. Commander Park consulted his tactical display. The Mercarian Trade Confederation has formally joined as a founding member. The Free Traders Alliance has committed 12 major fleet groups. The Zephyrian Assembly completed their withdrawal from Council space this morning and has requested immediate membership. We've also received formal applications from the Aquatic Collective, 3 minor species confederations in the Mid-Rim, and, surprisingly, the Solar Ion Republic. Admiral Harrison raised an eyebrow. The Solar Ion Republic was one of the older spacefaring civilizations, nearly as technologically advanced as the core world species, and significantly more influential than their membership in the Council had suggested. Their decision to abandon the Council for an alliance with humanity was sending shockwaves through the remaining member species. What's our total allied strength now? Including human forces, approximately 4,200 ships of various classes, plus defensive installations and support infrastructure across 17 different species territories. The new alliance controls roughly 40% of the galaxy's inhabited space and 65% of the major trade routes. Admiral Harrison studied the strategic display, noting how quickly the balance of power was shifting. The Council had assumed that dismissing humanity would be a minor adjustment to galactic politics. Instead, they had catalyzed the formation of a competing alliance that was already rivaling the Council's own strength. Admiral, Commander Zhang called again. We're receiving a transmission from Captain Rodriguez. He reports that the Void Crawler Incursion Force has made contact with the Outer Rim defensive perimeter. Admiral Harrison's attention sharpened. This was the moment of truth. Put him through. Captain Rodriguez's image appeared on the main screen, his expression grim. Admiral, the Void Crawlers have begun probing attacks against the abandoned defensive installations in Sectors 9 through 12. Without proper maintenance and operation, the installations are offering minimal resistance. The crawlers are systematically dismantling our old defensive network. Council response? Fragmented. The Thrakkery have deployed their home fleet to Sector 10, but they're operating independently without coordination from other Council forces. The Velkari have pulled their ships back to defend their core territories. The Crystalline Confederacy is attempting to coordinate some kind of unified response, but without the quantum communication networks, they're basically sending messages in bottles. Admiral Harrison considered the tactical situation. The Void Crawlers were extragalactic predators that consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space behind them. They were relentless, highly adaptive, and completely immune to diplomacy. Previous incursions had been defeated only through overwhelming coordinated force applied at precisely the right strategic points. What's the size of the crawler fleet? Latest estimates put them at approximately 3,500 vessels, including some new ship classes that are larger than anything we've seen before. Admiral, based on their current advance rate and the Council's fragmented response, they could be in the core worlds within 2 weeks. Admiral Harrison made her decision. Captain, withdraw all human scout ships to minimum safe distance. Continue monitoring but do not engage. Understood, Admiral. The connection terminated, leaving Admiral Harrison to contemplate the implications. The Council was facing potential extinction, and humanity was in a position to save them, or to let them face the consequences of their choices. Admiral, came a new voice from the communications station. We're receiving a direct transmission from Earth. President Chun is requesting immediate conference. Admiral Harrison moved to her private command center and activated the secure quantum communication link. President Chen's image appeared with the crystal clarity that was only possible through human-developed technology. Admiral, President Chen began without preamble. I've been monitoring the situation. What's your assessment of Council survival prospects? Without immediate intervention, Mr. President, the Council will be completely overrun within 2 weeks. Their fragmented defensive response cannot possibly stop an incursion of this size. And their requests for assistance? Increasingly desperate. The latest proposal offers humanity effective control over Council military operations in exchange for intervention against the Void Crawlers. President Chen's expression was thoughtful. Admiral, what would intervention require from our forces? Admiral Harrison consulted her tactical displays. Full deployment of a human defense fleet, plus coordination with our new allies. Estimated casualties would be significant, possibly 15,000 to 20,000 human military personnel. The operation would require us to essentially recreate the defensive network we just dismantled, but on an accelerated timeline while under direct attack. And the strategic implications? If we intervene and succeed, we save the Council species, but also demonstrate that they are completely dependent on human military protection. If we don't intervene, the Council is likely to be destroyed, but other species will conclude that humanity is willing to allow genocide for political purposes. President Chen was quiet for a moment. Admiral, I've been in communication with the leadership councils of our new allies. They presented an interesting proposal. Admiral Harrison waited. The Independent Worlds Defense Pact is prepared to intervene against the Void Crawler incursion, but only to protect species that formally join the Alliance. Council species that wish to survive would need to withdraw from the Council and accept membership in the new Alliance under human military leadership. Admiral Harrison understood immediately. It was a strategic masterstroke that would either force the remaining Council species to acknowledge human leadership or accept the consequences of their previous decisions. Were the terms of membership in the new alliance? Equal representation for all species in political matters, but human command authority over all military operations. Shared technological development with no species holding exclusive rights to innovations. And formal recognition that the alliance is based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical superiority. In other words, everything the Council should have offered humanity years ago. Exactly. Admiral Harrison considered the proposal. It was elegant, effective, and completely transformed the political structure of the galaxy. Instead of humanity fighting to regain acceptance in the Council species would need to fight for acceptance in humanity's new alliance. Admiral, Commander Zhang called from the communication station, urgent transmission from General Thrak News. Put him through. General Thrak News appeared on the display, his massive form showing obvious signs of battle stress. His armor was scarred, and his translator unit was sparking intermittently. Admiral Harrison, he rumbled, I am requesting immediate emergency assistance under any terms humanity deems appropriate. Admiral Harrison kept her expression neutral. General, what is the current tactical situation? The Void Crawler Advance Force has broken through the outer perimeter in 4 locations. My ships have been in continuous combat for 18 hours. We have lost 37 vessels with minimal damage to enemy forces. His translator sparked again. Admiral, the Council defensive response has completely collapsed. Individual species fleets are retreating to defend their homeworlds independently. General, all requests for military assistance must be processed through proper diplomatic channels on Earth. Admiral, there is no time for diplomatic channels. The crawlers will reach the inhabited worlds in Sector 9 within 6 hours. Millions of lives are at stake. Admiral Harrison made eye contact with President Chen on her private screen. The president nodded slightly. General, humanity is prepared to provide immediate emergency assistance, but only under specific conditions. Any conditions? Thrak News responded immediately. The Thrakkery war clans will accept any terms. Formal withdrawal from the Galactic Council and immediate membership application to the Independent Worlds Defense Pact, with full acceptance of human military command authority. General Thrak News' translator unit emitted a shower of sparks as it struggled to process his rapid response. Admiral, I do not have the authority to make such decisions for my entire species. Then contact someone who does, General. Human intervention forces can be at your position within 4 hours, but only to defend allied worlds. The connection terminated as Thrak News apparently cut communication to contact his government. Admiral Harrison turned to her communications officer. Zhang, prepare a message to all human fleet commanders. Operation Redemption is authorized. All vessels are to stand by for immediate deployment to assist Independent Worlds Defense Pact members against Void Crawler incursion. Understood, Admiral. Admiral Harrison activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, this is Admiral Harrison. The galaxy is about to learn the difference between humanity as a junior partner and humanity as a leader. We will demonstrate that our strength was never weakness, our cooperation was never desperation, and our patience was never submission. She paused, looking at the tactical displays showing the approaching Void Crawler fleets and the fragmenting Council defensive positions. Today we begin the creation of a new galactic order, one based on genuine partnership, mutual respect, and the understanding that true strength comes from unity freely chosen rather than hierarchy imposed through arrogance. The responses from across the human fleet were immediate and unanimous. Understood, Admiral. Ready for deployment. Admiral Harrison watched as her fleet began moving toward the battle zone. Behind them, the galaxy was transforming with each passing hour as species chose between the failing Council and the rising Alliance. The quiet exit had become a thunderous entrance, and humanity was no longer asking for a seat at the table. They were building their own table, and the galaxy was discovering that everyone else needed an invitation to sit at it. 6 months later, Admiral Sarah Harrison stood in the same chamber where Ambassador Chun had delivered humanity's quiet exit from the Galactic Council. But the room had been transformed both physically and symbolically. Gone were the hierarchical seating arrangements that had relegated humanity to observer status. In their place was a circular assembly where representatives of 43 different species sat as equals, with Earth's flag flying alongside those of the Mercarians, Zephyrians, Thrakari, and dozens of others in the newly formed Galactic Alliance. The battle against the Void Crawler incursion had lasted 3 weeks and had become known throughout the galaxy as the War of Awakening. It had been a decisive victory for the human-led alliance, but not without cost. The final casualty reports showed 23,000 Alliance military deaths, including 8,400 humans. However, the strategic and political results had reshaped the entire galaxy. Of the original Galactic Council's 12 major member species, 9 had formally withdrawn and joined the new alliance during the crisis. The Thrakari had been the first, followed within hours by the Crystalline Confederacy when their homeworld had come under direct Void Crawler attack. The Velkari Consortium had held out until the second week of fighting, when the collapse of their trade networks had forced them to acknowledge that their economic survival depended on alliance membership. Only 3 species had remained loyal to the original council: the Hegemony Core Worlds, the Nexus Worlds, and the Stellar Dominion. They now controlled less than 12% of inhabited galactic space, and were discovering that political pride was a poor substitute for economic and military cooperation. Admiral Harrison took her seat as Supreme Military Commander of the Alliance, a position that would have been unthinkable under the old council structure. Next to her sat President Chun, now serving as the Alliance's first elected civilian leader, and Ambassador Sarah Chun, who had returned from retirement to serve as Secretary of Interspecies Relations. The first matter before the Alliance Council, announced Secretary Chun, is the formal petition for membership submitted by the Nexus Worlds delegation. Admiral Harrison watched as Ambassador Zelthara, the same individual who had dismissively described human contributions as well-intentioned but inadequate, approached the central podium. His aquatic environmental suit had been modified with new humidity indicators that were flashing almost constantly. Honored members of the Alliance Council, Zelthara began, his translator unit working overtime to convey the appropriate tone of respect. The Nexus worlds formally request membership in the Galactic Alliance and acceptance of the Covenant of Equals that governs this body. Admiral Harrison exchanged a glance with President Chun. The Covenant of Equals was humanity's revolutionary contribution to galactic governance, a set of principles that guaranteed equal representation regardless of species size or technological advancement, established shared responsibility for mutual defense, and created binding commitments to peaceful conflict resolution. Secretary Chun consulted her tablet. Ambassador Zelthara, the Nexus Worlds application has been reviewed by the membership committee. However, there are several concerns that must be addressed before membership can be approved. Zelthara's environmental suit rippled with nervous energy. We are prepared to address any concerns the Alliance may have. First, Secretary Chun continued, the Nexus Worlds must formally renounce all claims to technological superiority over Alliance member species and acknowledge that innovation comes from cooperation rather than hierarchy. The Nexus Worlds formally renounce such claims and acknowledge the wisdom of cooperative development, Zelthara replied immediately. Second, the Nexus Worlds must provide reparations for the economic damages caused by their participation in the trade embargo imposed on Alliance members during the transition period. Admiral Harrison suppressed a smile. The trade embargo had been the Council's desperate attempt to pressure Alliance members into returning to the fold. It had backfired spectacularly when the Alliance's combined economic strength had proven to be substantially larger than the remaining councils, and several neutral species had actually joined the Alliance specifically to gain access to their trading networks. The Nexus Worlds accept full responsibility for damages and are prepared to negotiate appropriate reparations, Zelthara said, his translator unit adding a note of resignation to his voice. Third, Secretary Chun said, her voice taking on a more serious tone, the Nexus Worlds must provide a formal apology to humanity for the circumstances surrounding our departure from the original council, and acknowledge that the dismissive treatment of human contributions was both strategically damaging and morally wrong. The chamber fell silent. This was the moment that everyone had been waiting for, the formal acknowledgement of the mistakes that had led to the current situation. Zelthara's environmental suit stilled completely as he composed his response. When he spoke, his voice carried none of his former condescension. The Nexus Worlds formally apologized to humanity and to all Alliance members for our failure to recognize the value of human contributions to galactic civilization. We acknowledge that our dismissive treatment of human technological innovations, military sacrifices, and diplomatic efforts was both strategically catastrophic and fundamentally unjust. He paused, and his suit rippled with what Admiral Harrison recognized as deep shame. We further acknowledge that humanity's quiet departure from the Council was not an act of spite or abandonment, but a dignified response to systemic disrespect that should never have been tolerated. We accept full responsibility for the political crisis that followed and for the lives lost during the Voidcrawler incursion due to our fragmented response. Secretary Chun nodded approvingly. The Alliance Council will vote on the Nexus Worlds membership application at the conclusion of today's session. As Zelthara returned to the Observers section, Admiral Harrison reflected on how completely the balance of power had shifted. 6 months ago, humanity had been fighting for recognition as equals. Now, former Council species were fighting for the privilege of joining humanity's alliance. The next matter, Secretary Chun announced, is the status report on the Hegemony Core Worlds. General Thraknews, now serving as the Alliance's Strategic Defense Coordinator, rose from his seat. His massive frame still bore scars from the Voidcrawler War, but his bearing showed a confidence and purpose that had been missing during his council days. The Hegemony continues to maintain its independence from both the Alliance and the Remnant Council, he reported. However, their isolation is becoming increasingly problematic. Without access to Alliance trade networks, their economy has contracted by approximately 60%. Their military capabilities have degraded significantly without access to human-developed technologies and coordination systems. Any indications they might reconsider their position? Asked President Chun. Intelligence suggests that High Magistrate Veltar is facing significant internal pressure to negotiate alliance membership. However, the hegemony leadership appears to be paralyzed by their inability to accept the loss of their previous dominant position. Admiral Harrison understood. The hegemony had been the de facto leaders of the old council, and accepting alliance membership would mean acknowledging humanity's leadership role. For a species that had spent centuries believing in their own superiority, that psychological adjustment was proving impossible. Recommendation? President Chen asked. Maintain current policy. Admiral Harrison interjected. We keep the door open for eventual membership, but we don't compromise alliance principles to accommodate hegemony pride. They'll either adapt or become irrelevant. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Alliance early warning system. Admiral Harrison activated her personal display and felt her breath catch as she read the report. Council members, she announced, rising from her seat. We have a situation requiring immediate attention. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected a massive fleet movement in the hegemony's outer territories. The chamber fell silent as Admiral Harrison activated the main tactical display, showing the sensor readings from the frontier regions. Approximately 800 unidentified vessels of unknown configuration are approaching hegemony space from extragalactic regions. Based on their trajectory and energy signatures, they appear to be void crawler remnants, survivors from the fleets we destroyed 6 months ago. President Chun leaned forward. Are they heading for Alliance territory? Negative. Their current course puts them on a direct intercept with the hegemony homeworld. Based on their speed and current position, they'll reach hegemony space in approximately 48 hours. The implications were clear to everyone in the chamber. The hegemony, with their degraded defensive capabilities and isolated position, could not possibly repel a void crawler assault of this magnitude. Their entire civilization faced extinction. What are our options? Asked Secretary Chun. Admiral Harrison consulted her tactical displays. We could deploy Alliance forces to intercept the void crawler fleet before they reach hegemony space. However, this would require a major military commitment and would essentially mean fighting a war to save a species that has rejected Alliance membership. And if we don't intervene, asked President Chun, the hegemony will be destroyed, along with approximately 12 billion sentient beings. Admiral Harrison replied matter-of-factly. The chamber erupted in voices as representatives from various species began debating the moral and strategic implications. Through it all, Admiral Harrison watched Ambassador Zelthara in the Observers section, noting how the representative of the Nexus worlds was sitting in complete silence, clearly understanding that a species might face a similar situation if they continued to delay their Alliance membership decision. President Chun called for order. The Alliance Council will vote on whether to authorize military intervention to defend the hegemony core worlds against void crawler assault. The debate that followed lasted 2 hours and touched on every aspect of Alliance principles and values. Some species argued that intervention was a moral imperative regardless of political differences. Others contended that the Alliance couldn't afford to waste resources defending those who rejected cooperation. Still others suggested that intervention should be contingent on immediate hegemony agreement to Alliance membership. When the vote was finally called, the result was unanimous. The Alliance would intervene to defend the hegemony core worlds with no conditions attached. Admiral Harrison felt a surge of pride as she listened to the reasoning provided by various representatives. The Alliance had chosen to act based on their values rather than their grievances, demonstrating the kind of moral leadership that the old council had never achieved. Admiral Harrison, President Chun announced formally, "You are hereby authorized to deploy Alliance forces as necessary to defend the hegemony core worlds against void crawler assault." Admiral Harrison stood and saluted. Mr. President, Alliance forces will deploy within 6 hours. We will defend every sentient being in hegemony space as if they were our own citizens. As the council session concluded and representatives began coordinating the emergency response, Admiral Harrison reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Humanity's quiet exit from the council had been intended as a dignified withdrawal from a relationship that had become untenable. Instead, it had triggered the creation of a new galactic order based on genuine cooperation rather than hierarchical dominance. The galaxy had learned that respect couldn't be demanded. It had to be earned through consistent action and moral leadership. Humanity had earned that respect through 8 years of service in council space, maintained it through their dignified withdrawal, and demonstrated it through their willingness to save former enemies from extinction. 6 hours later, Admiral Harrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as the largest Alliance fleet in history moved toward battle against an old enemy. Behind them, 43 species worked together as equals to defend a world that had rejected their alliance. It was the kind of moral courage that the old council had never possessed, and the kind of leadership that humanity had always been capable of providing. The quiet exit had become a thunderous entrance into a new age of galactic civilization. And as the Alliance fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying hope to those who had lost it, Admiral Harrison knew that humanity had finally found its true place among the stars, not as supplicants seeking acceptance, but as leaders inspiring others to be better than they had been. The galaxy had changed forever, and it had changed for the better. Sometimes the greatest victory was simply refusing to let pride triumph over principles, and sometimes the most powerful statement was the willingness to help even those who didn't deserve it. In the end, that was what made humanity human, and what made the galaxy a place worth defending.